happened in California is we are setting a trend for the rest of the nation whereby we've got a shrinking percentage of homeowners and more people are being trapped in rental units, and they're at the mercy of the landlords, who is often unscrupulous and just money hungry. And now we've got the governments colluding with private interests to manipulate markets, particularly the housing market. The reason that the government wants to manipulate the housing market, real estate market, upward is because they get more property taxes by so doing. So it's a very simple thing to understand the motive. And this is what's known as fascism, whenever you've got a government. So you see, it's not has to do anything to do with Democrat or Republican. It's way worse than that. It'd be nice if, well, it was just the Republicans doing it or Democrats, wouldn't it? No, it's the government, it's the establishment, it's the system. It's like a snake eating its tail. Then they come up with this welfare. Well, let's subsidize these poor. And so everybody points at the finger at the poor. You're the one that's causing the state, the nation to go in debt. It's you, you're inept. So it's your fault, when really nothing can be further from the truth. So they come up with the welfare according to their Cloward and Piven strategy. If you look that up, you'll understand. This is intentionally imposed poverty. This is artificial scarcity. This is invented austerity through putting nations and states in debt. So it's very important, and individuals, of course. It's very important to understand how this snake eating its tail works. That it cannot succeed because if the government's job is to look after the poor because they created a problem, they created the wealth disparity, they created the abject poverty, and so they feel like they've got a social obligation to set up these human welfare services, supposedly to provide essential human needs, food and shelter and water. But they're letting more and more people fall through the cracks. You've got to understand how this thing works. And that's very important. People, there has to be a level of fear that compels people to go out and, do whatever it takes to earn those exorbitant prices that are being extracted for rents. That, is very a pernicious thing. It's a bad thing when they keep taking a higher and higher percentage of your income to pay rent, and you figure, I got to take another job, I can't get more money, and it's a very bad thing. So more and more people just give up. They just get off the, they get off the hamster wheel and they just give up. They go live in their car in the bushes at a relative's house, but they don't want to play the game anymore, you see. And so they're out of the system. And more of that is happening because you reach a point where you can only push so hard, you can only squeeze so much blood out of the turnips being the people, and they don't have any more to give. So, the demand on the system becomes greater and greater, and more people fall through the cracks. I understand there's 10-year or more waiting list. They won't even let you on the list in some areas to get this subsidized housing. And of course that money goes to subsidize the landlord, so it goes in the landlord pockets. And whether you're a landlord that accepts Section 8, these subsidized payments from the government or not, you're benefiting from it because the entire industry being subsidized by that money causes the prices to go up because landlords are constantly penciling in and calculating what the going rate of rents is, and so they certainly don't want lower rents. They're trying to please their peers, right? The people that are like them, fellow landlords. So it becomes a big monopoly. And all the special interest groups that benefit from high housing costs, including the government agencies, the innocent little homeowner that calls it capitalism when nothing could be further from the truth. And the only ones not benefiting are the renters. And in California now, again, that's a majority of the people are being hurt by high housing costs. They are not benefiting at all. And it's important to understand when people want to blame the working class, when they want to blame minimum wage workers, for example. They say, well, if you're going to get a raise, that's going to cause inflation. But people don't talk about the fact that if you've got a cost of living that keeps going up and you don't get a raise, there's no difference than if you had a steady cost of living and wages continually went into decline. So yes, I'm very much opposed to wages continually declining. And so I don't want to hear that argument from anybody that considers themselves a thinking human being, because it's stupid and it's not going to fly. So mathematically speaking, it's the same thing. So for example, 50 years ago, minimum wage was approximately $1.50 an hour conservatively. It was actually closer to $1.60, $1.65 maybe. But in terms of buying power today, that's $25 approximately, depending on where you live. Of course, back then you could buy a home on a minimum wage income. Today, no, not even close. No, probably nowhere in the country anymore. So that has been taken away. We've made anti-social economic progress. Things have just gone downhill. And to this day, they continue to disintegrate and decline and to decay. And what we've got is a chain reaction situation. The people that have caused these problems, they knew what the net result would be. They knew that it would cause this great wealth disparity. They knew these things. They knew it would create poverty. They knew it would create hopelessness by creating this bandwagon effect. That, hey, you better get in now, man. You better, if you haven't bought a house yet, man, you better buy it. You know, that bandwagon mentality, that bandwagon doctrine. And oh, hey, we're the lucky ones. We're status quo. We made it onto the bandwagon. You poor saps that didn't. Now you're going to be poor and oppressed for the rest of your life. You're hopeless. Just go get welfare, have them send me a check. And of course, Section 8 welfare pays 90 plus. I mean, can you imagine in New York City, your rent is $2,000 a month for a flat. The government is subsidizing 90% of that perpetually. So it'd be cheaper, and it's not hyperbole to suggest that it'd be cheaper to just purchase people homes, because at least then the government would be done and through with the housing costs, and people would own their own house. But instead, they've got to pay the landlord forever in perpetuity. So you tell me, logically speaking, rationally and reasonably speaking, what would be a better deal for the government, who is supposed to be you and me and every other taxpayer out there, right? It's supposed to be representative of everybody, not some. So you understand fully what I'm talking about. You understand what I mean when I talk about chain reaction inflation. And one thing leads to another, cause and effect. You understand what Isaac Newton meant when he said, for every action there is an equal and though opposite reaction. You understand how these things work. You understand a lot. You have wisdom. And you want to put that wisdom to good use by educating other people and telling them the score and telling them what happened here. How the people running the show are very diabolical. They're very sinister characters. And they are merciless. They're thugs and they're murderous. They don't care. They'll do anything to get their way. They're spoiled, murderous brats. And whatever it takes to keep things in check and keep things going in the trajectory, the direction, what's trending, then that's what they're for. And they're willing to do anything to keep things going, hired killers and whatever it takes to make sure that the system stays intact. But a change is coming nonetheless. And it's literally the hand of God directing people, empowering people through knowledge. Because I don't buy into the system. I don't support it. Anybody that supports the system silently, it's like being at an auction. You're sitting there with a few of your buddies and You are the special interest groups. And as long as you can afford to keep paying those prices, those bids, and you keep winning, and you look around, all other people are losing, and you don't even want to look around anymore. But see, you're a cause of the problem. Your willingness to pay those high prices at that auction are causing my problem. So nobody can be silent and get away with it. Your conscience will be seared. You will pay the price by not caring about others that don't have the advantage that you have, that are weaker than you in some way, that didn't have the opportunity for an education. And remember, there's only so many good paying jobs out there. It's just like baseball. Do you think the fact that these baseball players make millions of dollars in their contracts indicates a shortage of very, very good baseball players, and in many cases better than the professionals? It doesn't mean that at all. And it's like that right down the line with any trade. A lot of it's just a roll of the dice. That's it, man. You just got lucky. You lucked out. That's why you got that position. There's only so many available slots for landlords. Not everybody could be a landlord, can they? Otherwise, nobody would be. And in which case, landlords wouldn't have any tenants. And it's like that with every single industry. So don't think you're so smart and there's any room for your pride or ego if you have, quote, succeeded in this establishment. That's nothing to be proud about. In fact, if anything, that's probably something you should be ashamed of, to be rich in a world that's so wicked. You know, to be prosperous while poverty is exploding around you and the wealth disparity keeps growing. And not on people that are lazy, but on decent, hard-working, good people. It's like Jesus said. He said, you know, it's harder for a rich man to go to heaven than a camel to fit through the eye of a needle. It's possible that a rich man can go, but he's got a lot tougher going. He's got a lot more proving to do. He's better show that he really cares about others, and that he understands that he can't enjoy his prosperity while there's so much misery, unnecessary, invented misery and suffering out there because of poverty. And because of this monetary-based reality, quote, if you want to call it a reality, that we're all born into and sucked into. But back to understanding chain reaction inflation. Well, it's like this. One thing leads to another. So let's start at the beginning. You're a tenant. You say, well, I don't know how long I want to live in this town, so I don't want to buy a house. I just want to rent for convenience sake. And so you start paying rent. And then the landlord tells you, hey, I got to raise my rent. You know, he's got some excuse. And he tells you, well, it's got to go up. And it's got to go up, and it's got to go up. A year later, and, you know, on and on and on. And you find it frustrating, but you always manage somehow to pull a rabbit out of the hat and pay that increase in the rent. And what you would typically do is tell your boss, well, I need a raise, and you would give him the justification that, you know, your cost of living went up. Your landlord raised your rent, and this housing is a commodity that you just can't live without. It's an essential human need. So, your boss gives you a raise, and then he figures, well, somehow I'm going to have to recoup this because I really couldn't afford that raise I gave my employee. So let's say he's you know, he owns a grocery store. So what he does, he raises the prices of the food. People go in and buy food, and they say, oh my gosh, the price for my food has gone up. And so now somehow I got to figure out how I'm going to make more money because I was living hand in mouth before. And so everybody goes out, whatever business they're in, whatever field, they're asking their bosses or their clients, they're scrambling to make more money because their cost of living went up. Without justification, you understand. If you understand supply and demand economics, you understand a lot. You understand that occasionally during a drought, a famine, that it's possible prices have a justification for getting more deer. But if there's no disruption in the supply chain, then there's no justification for prices to